in the previous episode.
And they received over 60 cards in the past month that were broken, and 40 something of them were actually defective with the same exact defect. And supposedly drivers are the only common thing in between all of them. And what is exactly happening? Today's video sponsor is GGG. Where using my SKG discount code leads to a 25% off across several products, making a Windows 10 serial key only $16. After the payment, you'll receive the key in your account, and all you need to do is to introduce it in your Windows settings, and bam! You have an activated system. Hello guys, Ashit Gameplays, I'm Fabio Pisco and welcome to my channel. So as for today's video, we have a follow-up of the previous video that I made about GPUs, AMD GPUs supposedly dying from driver updates, okay? That's what I talk about a bit in the video, what could lead to this and what could be the possible issue, okay? And now we actually have a follow-up from the same one that made the first video, which is Strix-F Germany, okay? And now he actually made a follow-up. He even changed the previous title of the video that we're talking about right now, the first one, because there was a lot of confusion and misunderstanding from the title, okay? And this is basically a follow-up video of the video that he did to follow up that same issue as well. It might seem confusing, but it is basically just a follow-up of the video that I made as well. And like we were talking about in my previous video, we said several times that the possibility in the comment section and in the video as well, that the possibility of it being due to the 22.11.2 drivers was almost impossible, okay? Not to say literally impossible, okay? To have damage due to the 22.11.2 drivers, sorry. And I said that in the first drivers, people could actually install the 22.12.1 drivers on the previous generation, according to what some users said. I did not confirm that, and that could actually make the card get issues, okay? And when I say issues, I do not say cracked GPU dies, because that's what happened in some of the GPUs, not all, but some of them had cracked GPU dies, and the drivers absolutely cannot do that. They may actually mess with your GPU to a certain point of having to send it back, but not with cracked dies. And this time Strix-F Germany actually made a 150 hours testing on 4 cards from AMD, non-opened, okay, cards that were not opened, and we have another 4 from AIBs like Gigabyte, Asus and so on that were opened before, okay? And it tested the voltages, the memory, the GPU die, the sock, and etc. Okay? So before I give you kind of the resume of what he said, let's just watch 1 minute where he explains things and why he's doing what he's doing.
Very short story. We received for the past 1 month around 60 devices from those models, and we diagnosed 48 cards with the same problems: shorted memory rails, shorted sock rail, and broken GPU chips. This was very strange to me. To see in such a short period of time so many devices with the same problem was kind of shocking. And that's why I made the last video asking you to give me more information. What kind of card you're using, what kind of drivers you're using, and what kind of problems you have. The drivers. Drivers are the only thing that matches through all the customers. So not all, 47 customers have updated the drivers. Only 1 customer used the card with the old driver, but his card is also broken the same way. I want to make my own research. I studied physics and I like to work with data. That's why I decided to collect some cards from those models and run my own tests to see what kind of results I can get, what kind of data. Is there any difference between the drivers, the new version, the old version, and so on?
And well, basically, according to Strix-F Germany, once again, 47 customers were using the 22.11.2 drivers, while just only 1 customer was using the previous drivers, I suppose something like the 22.5.1. Well, like I told you before, 4 cards were never opened, and they were the reference cards from AMD, and the other 4 cards were opened, and they were AIBs. Crucifix Germany also tested and checked the firmware, and the firmware in all cards was stock. Okay, so no modded BIOS, nothing. The firmware was stock, everything was as it should be in all the cards. Okay, so the Asus model had an Asus BIOS. The Sapphire model, I don't even know if there was a Sapphire model, or the Gigabyte model had indeed the Gigabyte BIOS, and so on. Everything was up to date and checked. Okay, all was good. And once again, at minute 5, almost minute 5, Crucifix Germany explains what all of us were actually saying from the beginning, that drivers cannot do that, okay? Drivers cannot break a GPU to that extent. They just can't, because the drivers cannot update the firmware and the drivers cannot update the BIOS, okay? So it was not the drivers, and it was impossible for the drivers to break the GPU in that same scenario, because the GPUs were short circuit. Yes, from the comments, I believe it's circuit. Yeah. After that, it tested for several hours the previous drivers of April, which were the 22.5.1 versus the 22.11.2 drivers, okay? So it tested the older drivers versus the newer drivers for the RX 6000 series once again, with the same voltages, all at stock. And after all the tests with FurMark and 3D Mark, he actually noticed that the voltages were all equal independently of the drivers, okay? Sock voltage, memory voltage, core voltage. He noticed though that on the reference versions the temperatures were higher, because somehow the fan curve wasn't going over 35%. So the hotspot temperatures were around 95, 100 degrees, which is not that bad actually, it's not that bad. But it could easily just decrease the hotspot temperatures to around 75 by increasing the fan speed from 35% to 45%, which is very acceptable in terms of noise. And after that, he actually changed the thermal paste on those cards in order to see if the thermal paste and the thermal pads as well, in order to see if the cards actually had better temperatures, but they didn't. And I know that from experience, because I actually removed the RX 6800 thermal pad, because yes, that card, at least my RX 6800 stock, without being opened, it actually brings not thermal paste, but it brings a thermal pad. Quite insane, huh? At least my 6800 did. So a thermal pad I changed for a better thermal paste, and the temperatures were exactly the same. At least even more, in the first time that I actually changed the thermal paste, the temperatures were even worse, because I had too much thermal paste. I had to remove a little, apply again, or at least remove it, reapply with less thermal paste, and then the temperatures were equal, not better. And that's how much the thermal pad was actually great there. He also had one GPU that was constantly having crashing black screens, problems with the drivers, and it didn't actually knew what was going on, because the problems came after like 30 minutes. It didn't talk about temperatures, so I don't really know if the card was having temperature spikes after some time. If something was getting a short circuit after some time, I don't really know, but he did say that he would send the card to an X-ray analysis in order to see what's wrong with the card. But so far it seems like an odd scenario, and I will test it further in order to see what's actually causing the issue. But yeah. But well, concluding, he basically, after the 20 minutes video that you can see with a link in the description and on the pinned comment, by the way, thanks Crucifix Germany for actually testing this for us. After all the work that he did, he actually told us that the drivers weren't the problem, once again, obviously, because the drivers cannot do this, but that he thought that the cards came from the same place, okay, from the same place, and that the cards had exactly the same problem. So the cards had short circuit on the memory controller, on the GPU die, and on the sock. Okay, everything was short out. So he tested several cards, the non-opened ones, the opened ones, and everyone had exactly the same thing. But then he actually opened the non-opened cards, and they were too clean inside, okay? And like he said, cards from normal users, they are not as clean inside because users did not open them to actually clean them. So it was kind of odd that the GPUs were so clean after that time of usage, okay? Makes no sense. So what makes sense is that, like it says, those cards were most likely mining cards. They came from miners that abused the cards, obviously, and then tried to clean them and make them look as new. Even had a card that actually had the GPU die attached to the cooler, which is just insane. So the GPU die was literally ripped apart and half of it was in the cooler, which is just, once again, insane. The GPU was more than dead, okay? Now, what ChrisFix Germany also says is that it may actually be due to the storing conditions and not the abusing conditions on the cards per se. So a lot of humidity can actually damage the cards if you don't let them kind of, let's say, if you don't let the cards kind of eat up in order to remove all the humidity can in fact damage your cards, okay? That's one of the issues. And he also says that the cards are most likely coming from the same place, okay? These cards, because there are not like thousands of cards with issues, there are like 50, maybe 100 cards with issues, and like he says, the cards are coming, or most likely are coming from the same place, from the same mining facility that storaged those same GPUs on the same place with a lot of humidity. But who's better to explain that than ChrisFix himself? Let's hear once again.
I think that some crypto miner, because nowadays, so right now the crypto mining is not so popular, and a lot of people with a lot of cards, they stopped mining months ago, and I think that those cards, so the cards they have are just in some warehouses or some like a storage place. The question is, if those cards were from the same person, so the same seller sold all these cards in internet in end of November and the first days of December, the question is where those cards were stored, because it's very important, the temperature, the room temperature and air humidity.
And well guys, basically that's it. After all, it wasn't the drivers, and some people were obviously trashing AMD once again. Oh, their drivers suck, now they're killing cards and so on. Well, it happened actually some years ago, maybe over a decade ago, but Nvidia actually had an issue where cards were burning, and that was indeed because of the drivers, because the drivers were changing the firmware and cards were burning, okay? But that was not the issue here. You may be actually very annoyed by the AMD drivers. You may have problems. Sometimes the problems are actually related to the drivers, but most times they are user error related, okay? So you're not doing the things that you should, and the drivers are causing problems, but the problems are not the drivers. Some days ago I made a stream of the 100k subscribers, and I actually had the GPU with errors, and the stream actually went down because I had a problem when playing Need for Speed Unbound, and the drivers crashed. What was the problem? Was the drivers? No, I thought that it was the overclock settings that I was testing. Well, it happens that it wasn't the overclocking settings. The overclocking settings were actually not that unstable. The problem was actually Corsair IQ, because I recently installed that because of my new headset that I sent back after that and got a Sennheiser one, thank God. And it was the problem. Corsair IQ was the problem. I tested the same exact settings without Corsair IQ. I uninstalled the software and I had no issues for several hours. So Corsair IQ was causing the issues like it caused like 2 or 3 years ago. I had black screens due to Corsair IQ, and some other software and some other settings that you have, maybe not a BIOS update, maybe not a chipset drivers update, something is causing the issues in over 90% of the cases, and only like 10 or 5% of cases are actually related to the drivers, okay? Once again, it was most likely mining cards that most likely had exchanged BIOS for some time, not when they sold the cards. So they put the normal BIOS once again when they sold the cards. They were stored in possibly very high humidity environments that killed the card as soon as the user used it for some time without warming it up. The humidity actually ended up killing the card because it caused a short circuit, okay? I think it's so odd saying circuit. Anyway, because I like to say circuit or circuit. It just sounds so much better. Anyway, once again, not the drivers. It was most likely mining cards with lots of humidity that cause short circuits, okay? And like Chris Fix says, once again,
we will see us in the next one, and be careful what you are buying from internet.
Yeah, be careful with what you buy from the internet. That's basically it. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video. And see you in the next one, guys. Which will most likely be the 6800 versus the 7900 XT versus the 7900 XTX. I would love to do the 6900 XT or the 6950 XT versus the other two cards, but AMD still did not send one of those cards, 6900 XT or 6950 XT, because they seem to not have one in the Iberian part of the company, basically the Spain and Portugal part of the company. So that's sad, and I don't want to spend more money now because I already did with the 7900 XTX. So yeah, once again, thanks a lot for watching, and see you in the next video.